There are decisions that look like maturity, like integrity, like doing the right thing, and that's exactly why they're lethal. Because nobody warns you about the kind of choice that doesn't feel like a mistake until the day you realize you've been living inside it for years. This story isn't about someone evil. It's about someone careful, someone loved, someone who made one rational decision and quietly turned into the most dangerous person in the room. By the end of this story, you'll understand how a person can ruin a family, erase a life, and still be convinced they're the victim. No ghosts, no magic, just human behavior when it's pushed far enough. Before we begin, you need to understand the rule that makes this story possible. People don't destroy themselves with bad choices. They destroy themselves with reasonable ones. Repeated. Small permissions, small compromises. And then, one day, the final compromise doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like the only option. Elliot Marrow was the kind of man strangers trusted, the kind of man who held doors open without making it a performance. He was 34, wore neutral colors, spoke gently, and seemed almost allergic to drama. He worked in compliance for a private care network, basically a job built on rules and paperwork and protecting vulnerable people from scams. He wasn't famous, he wasn't rich, but he was stable. And stability is a kind of power that people notice when they don't have it. That's why, when his mother's health started failing, everyone turned to him like gravity. His mother, Nadine, had been a school secretary for almost 30 years. She raised Elliot alone after his father left when Elliot was 6. She didn't date, didn't travel, didn't spend money on herself. Her life was built like a wall, brick by duty. And then, in her late 60s, she began forgetting small things. A kettle boiling dry, the stove left on, a neighbor's name, a doctor's appointment. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed emergency, just enough to make you start watching someone you love the way you'd watch a stranger near your wallet. Elliot did what a responsible son does. He moved her into his home temporarily. He took over her finances just in case. He began speaking for her at appointments because it was easier. And when his younger sister, Mara, called from across the country and said, "Are you sure she can't live on her own a little longer?" Elliot didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said calmly, "I'm the one here. I'm seeing it. I'm handling it." And that was the first decision. The decision that didn't feel like a mistake. The decision everyone praised. At first, Elliot's house looked like a rescue. Nadine had her own room, her own bathroom. He labeled cabinets, left gentle notes, bought her special tea. To outsiders, it looked like devotion, and in the beginning it was. But there was something else growing in Elliot, something quiet, something he never spoke out loud, not even to himself. He didn't just want to help, he wanted to be needed. That's the part people don't like to admit. Caretaking isn't always love. Sometimes it's a drug, sometimes it's control disguised as sacrifice. Elliot started taking over little things. He answered her phone because scammers target seniors. He opened her mail because she gets confused. He redirected her bank statements to his email so nothing gets missed. Nadine would ask about her checkbook sometimes. Elliot would smile and say, "You don't need to worry about that anymore. I've got you." And she would nod, because this is what mothers do when their children become the adults. They let go because fighting feels like insulting the love. Mara visited for a weekend that summer. She brought Nadine a scarf from Oregon, soft, expensive, bright red. Nadine's eyes lit up like someone had opened a window in her mind. Mara looked around and smiled politely. Then she pulled Elliot aside near the kitchen sink and whispered, "Are you okay? You seem tense." Elliot laughed, told her work was stressful, told her he was tired, told her he was fine. And he was, until Mara said one sentence that landed like a knife. "Mom seems smaller, like she's shrinking." Elliot's smile didn't fade, but something behind his eyes tightened, because shrinking was the point. Shrinking made her manageable. Shrinking made him essential. One night, Nadine tried to leave the house. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, no wild panic. Just a slow, confused wandering in slippers toward the front door at 2:13 a.m. Elliot woke up because the security chime beat. He found her standing there, holding the knob like she was waiting for permission from the universe. "Where are you going?" he asked softly. Nadine blinked at him. "I'm late," she said, "for work." Elliot felt cold spread through his ribs. His mother hadn't worked in years, but in her mind, she was still needed somewhere. He guided her back to bed, sat beside her, smoothed her hair, and when she fell asleep, Elliot didn't go back to bed. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, searching, reading, forums, articles, caregiver blogs, and in the middle of that desperate late-night research, he found a phrase that sounded like permission. Wandering behavior can become dangerous without supervision. The next day, Elliot bought a lock that required a code. He told Nadine it was for security. He told Mara it was a necessary precaution. Nadine didn't argue. She just stared at the new keypad like it was a stranger in her home. And that's when Elliot made the second decision, the one that still didn't feel like a mistake. He began documenting everything. Every moment she forgot. Every stumble in conversation. Every time she asked the same question. Not because he wanted to help doctors, but because paper is power. And Elliot worked in compliance. He understood how systems believe documents more than people. Mara called in September. She said she wanted to move Nadine closer to her. She said there were better assisted living options in Oregon. She said she could help financially. She said Elliot shouldn't have to carry everything. Elliot listened quietly. Then he said, "I don't think you understand what's happening. She's declining. Fast." Mara hesitated. "I know. That's why," Elliot cut in, still gentle. "And I don't think she should travel. It'll confuse her. It could accelerate things." It sounded reasonable. It sounded protective. It sounded like love. But then Mara said something that triggered the real monster. "Elliot, are you sure you're doing this for her?" Silence. A long one. Elliot finally spoke, and his tone was almost wounded. "What are you implying?" Mara tried to soften it. "I'm not accusing you. I'm just asking." Because she seems afraid sometimes, like she's walking on eggshells. Elliot didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't curse. He did something much worse. He sighed like a man suffering nobly and said, "Mara, you don't see what I see. And if you keep pushing, you'll stress her out. That's not fair to Mom. And that's how the trap worked. If Mara backed off, Elliot won. If Mara pushed harder, she became the villain hurting their mother. Within a month, Mara's calls started going to voicemail. Elliot would text, "Mom is resting. Bad day today. She's confused after you call." Mara began to feel like her love was harming the very person she was trying to protect. That's how you isolate someone without ever raising your voice. In November, Nadine fell in the bathroom. Nothing broke, but the hospital visit changed everything. A social worker asked questions. A doctor said cognitive impairment. Someone mentioned guardianship. Elliot nodded like a man carrying a sacred burden. Inside, something bright and terrible sparked. Guardianship meant legal control. Guardianship meant the system would approve what he was already doing. He filed paperwork. He brought his notes. He presented himself as calm, stable, exhausted. Mara was notified late. She tried to fly out. She argued over the phone. She begged to speak to Nadine alone. But Elliot kept repeating one sentence. "She doesn't understand what's happening. You're upsetting her." And because Nadine truly was confused sometimes, because she truly did repeat herself, because she truly did wonder Elliot had all the evidence he needed, guardianship was approved. The judge said something kind about Elliot's sacrifice. A clerk handed him the final forms. A pen was placed in his hand, and Elliot signed his name on a line that quietly erased his mother's autonomy. This is the moment most people would say, well, it had to happen, and maybe it did. But the story isn't about guardianship. It's about what Elliot did with it. Once Elliot had power, he started acting like he'd earned it, like he deserved compensation for his suffering. He used Nadine's savings to renovate the guest room for her safety. He upgraded his car for hospital trips. He reduced her clothing purchases. She doesn't need much now. And any time a small voice inside him whispered, "Is this wrong?" he would answer it with a louder one, "After everything I've done, I deserve stability." Nadine began asking to see her sister, Irene. Elliot told her Irene was busy, then sick, then traveling, then eventually. "You already saw her, Mum. You don't remember?" Nadine's face would crumple in confusion, and Elliot would hug her tight, too tight, and say, "It's okay, I'm here." He wasn't just caring for her anymore. He was editing her reality. Mara didn't quit. She started calling Irene. She started calling neighbors. She started asking questions Elliot couldn't control. Then, one December afternoon, Mara arrived unannounced. She had a key from years ago before the keypad lock. The door opened. The chime beeped. Elliot appeared in the hallway instantly, like he'd been waiting. Mara demanded to see their mother. Elliot said, "She's napping." Mara pushed past him toward Nadine's room. Elliot didn't grab her. He didn't hit her. He didn't scream. He said, very softly, with pure venom disguised as concern, "Mara, if you barge in and scare her, and she falls again, that's on you." Mara froze, because he was right. Not morally, but strategically. That's the horror of these people. They weaponize responsibility. Mara finally saw Nadine. Nadine looked up from the bed and smiled uncertainly, like she recognized Mara through fog. Mara sat beside her, holding her hand. "Mom," she whispered, "do you want to come with me?" Nadine blinked, looked at Elliot, then back at Mara, and she said something that shattered Mara's chest. I don't know what I'm allowed to want." Elliot's face didn't change, but his eyes looked pleased, because that sentence meant the system had worked. Nadine no longer trusted her own desires. 2 weeks later, Nadine had another incident. This time, she tried to leave again. She became frantic when she couldn't open the door. She cried. She pulled at the keypad like it was a cage. Elliot grabbed her shoulders. He told her to calm down. She screamed his name like he was a stranger. She shoved him weakly, but enough. And something in Elliot snapped. Not into violence, into certainty. He realized something with terrifying clarity. As long as Nadine still had moments of resistance, she was still a person. A person could testify. A person could contradict. A person could ruin him. So Elliot made a choice. Not an impulsive one, a careful one, a responsible one, the kind of choice that doesn't feel like a mistake until it's too late. He spoke to her doctor about agitation. He used the right words: safety, wandering, risk of injury, caregiver burnout. He asked about medication, and the doctor, overworked, cautious, hearing a calm man with legal guardianship, prescribed something to help stabilize mood. Elliot picked it up the same day. That night, he gave Nadine her pills with applesauce. He kissed her forehead. He said, "This is going to help." And for the first time in months, she stopped fighting. The medication didn't kill Nadine. Not directly. It did something worse. It took her last sharp edges away. It dulled her into compliance. It made her sleep longer, eat less, speak less. Her body began to fail the way bodies fail when they stop being asked to live. Mara called. Elliot said, "She's declining." And this time it was true. Mara flew out anyway. When she arrived, Nadine looked like a candle near the end, still lit, but barely. Mara begged Elliot to reduce the medication. Elliot said the doctor insisted. Elliot said it was necessary. Elliot said, "Do you want her terrified again?" Mara watched their mother try to form a sentence and lose it halfway. Watched her fingers tremble. Watched her eyes close too long. And in that moment, Mara understood the real cruelty. Elliot didn't have to hurt Nadine violently. He just had to make sure she couldn't fight back. Nadine died in February. Officially, complications from her condition. At the funeral, Elliot cried the most. He held Mara's shoulders like they were a burden. He said, "I did everything I could." And people believed him, because people love a martyr. They don't ask what the martyr got out of it. 3 months after Nadine's death, Mara received a package. No return address. Inside was a small notebook, Nadine's handwriting shaky, uneven. A few pages filled with broken sentences. Mara's throat tightened as she read. "I think my son is tired. I try to be good. I forget things and he looks angry. I want to go outside. I don't know how. I used to have money. I don't know where it went." Then the last line, the one that made Mara sit down on the kitchen floor. "I love him. I am afraid of him." Mara took the notebook to a lawyer. The lawyer said it would be difficult. Guardianship gave Elliot legal protection. There wasn't proof, of a crime. There was just a pattern of control, a pattern of isolation, a pattern of decisions that all sounded reasonable. Mara confronted Elliot anyway. He didn't deny it, not really. He just said quietly, "Do you know what it's like to watch someone disappear, day after day? I saved her from fear. And you want to judge me from a distance?" And Mara realized the last, most disgusting truth. Elliot truly believed he was the hero. That's why there was no justice. Because the villain didn't think he was a villain. He thought he was the only adult in the room. And the system agreed. So here's the question people hate. If someone controls you for your own good, at what point does protection become prison? And if you watched it happening slowly, politely, legally, would you even recognize it as evil before it was too late?